is affixed pretty hard on the um,
At YouTube on, by the
science
way.
of logic version. It's
Yeah.
completely absent in the encyclopedia. And because the encyclopedia was updated long since after uh, the the doctrine of essence, I'm thinking that he just sort of deleted it, but the determinations are the same. You know, the immediate unity of essence and existence uh, isn't really given like a hard and fast label as such in the EL. Which, you know, it's not a terrible thing. Harris calls it a truncated triad, but it's, I mean, I, I wouldn't call something truncated that is identified in both places as immediate and then mediated, and then the unity of the two, which it is. It's just that the one label is missing. Hmm. So anyway, he says, actual. Okay, I'm reading straight out of the EL, and I wouldn't call this so much a review as just a recapitulation of what we already read. Um, Jesus. Actuality is the unity, become immediate, of essence and existence, or of what is inner and what is outer. Same exact definition as in the chapter that we just read, called the absolute. The utterance of the actual is the actual itself, so that the actual remains still something essential in this expression, and is only something essential so far as it is
avocado? No.
in immediate
Sorry.
external
Okay.
existence.
Couple of good problems. Then he says, and this is 143, as this concreteness, actuality contains these determinations, essence and existence, what is inner and what is outer, and their distinction, and is therefore their development too, so that they are at the same time determined in it as semblance or as merely posited. And there's another one. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, you know, and then he numbers the triad, you know, 1, 2, and 3. So 1, as identity in general, it is first possibility, the inward reflection that is posited as the abstract and unessential essentiality in contrast to the concrete unity of the actual. Possibility is what uh, is essential to reality, uh, but in such a way that it is at the same time only possibility.
Like, it's like we're already going into the next chapter with that.
Yeah, it is. Uh, so yeah, um, so yeah, it's kind of interesting because if you want to read it in the EL, it's really only 142, and he doesn't use the word absolute as a placeholder. He just says actuality in the immediate is, you know, called by him the absolute, and then it's associated with Spinoza and Leibniz's systems. Um, I'm not familiar with Leibniz, but Spinoza's system is not like this. Spinoza's substance is Hegel's spirit, according to Errol Harris, and you know everybody who's ever compared the two properly without Jacobi as an intermediary. Um, so on the one hand, I almost think this chapter is superfluous in the bigger logic, but on the other hand, the description of the immediate version of actuality matches. It's just that, you know, uh,
I don't know. I'll read the rest out. He says, and this is page 213 on the bottom. Being and existence presented themselves earlier as forms of the immediate. Got that? Being is quite generally unreflected immediacy and passing over into another. Existence is immediate unity of being and reflection, and hence appearance. It comes from the ground and goes to the ground. The actual is the positedness of that unity, the relationship that has become identical with itself. Hence, it is exempted from passing over, and its externality is its energy. In that externality, it is inwardly reflected. Its being, its Dasein, its determinateness is only the manifestation of itself, not of an other.
Yeah,
So,
that's
yeah. So basically, what he's saying is that when you conceive in your mind, right, a picture of existence that's both being and thought created, right?
right.
In its unity and posed, right? This is what he's talking about. That's actuality, you know, the subject object combination formed in your head and manifested inwardly. In other words, reflected in your mind. Yeah.
The absolute when he goes into attributes. In the
Well,
second,
the absolute
yeah.
is, I think, the end. It's like the absolute idea, but I could be wrong about that.
So notes the absolute that in its form has returned to itself, or whose form is identical with its content.
Yeah.
So that's still, I think it's just, in a way, he's talking about when the absolute returns back to itself in full explicitness rather than it being implicit. That's all I get out of that. It's just
Well, when he's
has to go through everything up to this point. Yeah.
in the science of logic, he tries to pose this immediate actuality as being associated with sort of the Schellingian, you know, night in which all cows are black. Um, you know, and he tries to implicate Spinoza as well as being, you know, substance is the void into which all finite things disappear and never reappear as themselves, uh, which is the way that Jacobi wrote Spinoza is. But it's funny because Hegel's system is one that solves the problems of an immanent rationality that is um, a fully defined determinism and rationalism. Okay, Jacobi's caricature of Spinoza was formulated to try to show that rationality uh, is well uh, pantheism / atheism. That you know you're fallen from God if you follow Spinoza's path. So it's an interesting, it's interesting that Hegel's overall system is anti-Jacobian while making concessions to Jacobi, the you know uh, the irrationalist person making room for God in philosophy. And we know why this is historically, of course. And I know I've harped on this a little bit, but the fact that he
made out this chapter on the absolute and the science of logic itself to, you know, make this particular point. I think, I don't know. There's not much you can say about this determination other than that. Now I'm opening up the book. Uh, except that because he goes into attributed mode,
Right.
and the funny thing is, when you get into the EL attributed mode,
That.
I mean, he talks about modalities, but it almost feels like he is. It almost seems like this is a throwaway chapter because, I don't know. I'm
Oh,
I'm not sure. I read the thing cover to cover. But I don't understand it at all. What did you get out of it? I don't have much to say. I really don't.
I mean, the only thing that I get is he does have the apps. The thing, and this is the thing he's critiquing his. Jacobi's version of Spinoza is that you got to go start from the absolute as the beginning and toward the end. You can't just start out external and assume that it has a beginning, because all that leads back is to the absolute again.
Right.
Hey, Doug.
Hey, Doug. We were just discussing that this chapter that we're on, which is the first chapter under actuality, which is the third part of the essential triad. It's called the absolute, but this entire chapter, or most of it, is truncated to one, count them, one entry in the Encyclopedia Logic. And the only way it appears there is by its description. The label "the absolute" is completely absent. You'll open the EL and you'll look in vain for the chapter on the absolute at this point. In essence, it's just not there.
Yeah, because it says even the Hegelian poster, it's the absolute has substance, attribute, and modes.
Mm. Yeah, and the EL, he's got actuality, and then 142 goes into it, and it talks about the immediate form of the unity of essence and existence. That tracks with both books.
I'm curious if they even mapped this.
Well, he talks about Aristotle and Plato,
Oh.
and Aristotle and Plato's.
Are you saying something, Doug?
The immediate.
Oh, I see what's going on. I got an echo because YouTube decided to start playing. Ignore me.
No, you're fine. Let's see here. He talks about. I'm trying to remember.
It says 142 here. Is that what that we read? Even Hegel.net says the same thing about that subsection being the absolute.
Yeah, the EL completely deleted it. Well, no, well,
The absolute is the simple absolute identity in the determination of identity.
yeah. I mean, if you go to page 527 in the Science of Logic, he identifies this part. Um, well, first, second, and third, he says that this unity of inner and outer is absolute actuality. Um, but this actuality is, in the first instance, the absolute as such, insofar as it is posited as a unity in which form has sublated itself and made reflection is external in its relation to this absolute, which it merely contemplates rather than is the absolute's own movement. But since it is essentially this movement, it is so as the negative return of the absolute into itself. Secondly, we have actuality proper. Actuality, possibility, and necessity constitute the formal moments of the absolute or its reflection. Thirdly, the unity of the absolute and its reflection is the absolute relation, or rather the absolute as relation to itself. So,
Yeah, I figured.
going off of that, I think chapter 1, which we just read for, is talking about the structure of actuality and what it's supposed to do.
I don't
And
know.
then you have what actuality consists of in chapter 2. Does
Right.
that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah, because right now, because you look about it, because remember inner and outer, I just drew a circle of loops upon itself, being the outside and essence being the inside. And that's just already what we already knew. It's just derived itself for actuality.
Right, right.
So,
Well, remember the inner being the outer is that
mhm,
what's reflected reflects what is outer, what is exterior.
right.
Exterior and interior match. Thought matches reality, as it were. They stop being mismatched,
The
but
so
only internally. In other words, in your head, in your
right.
thought space.
So the first absolute is just, or this is substance is the formal absolute. Then we got to deal with identity in attribute, in difference, in mode.
Right.
Okay.
And so you go into what's possible, what's necessary, and what's, and that's like the actual.
Yeah, it feels like we're going back through and redefining again on this one, which happens sometimes in the dialectic.
Well, it happens every time.
Well, I mean, it's just kind of like it's not one that feels like it's propelling itself forward. It's kind of like slingshotting again before it moves forward. Is my feeling.
Well, you look at the solar system and then you think about thought, and it's exactly the same thing, right?
Yeah, let me go grab some.
Yeah, yeah, take your time.
I think it's more of a spiral, but
Well, yeah. Oh, well, of course, of course.
there's a lot moving forward.
Yeah, yeah. I'll just read this out because it seems to be, the opening summary, and this is on page 530. He says the simple substantial identity of the absolute is indeterminate, or rather, in it every determinateness of essence and existence or being in general, as well as of reflection, has dissolved itself. Accordingly, the process of determining what the absolute is has a negative outcome, and the absolute itself appears only as the negation of all predicates and as the void.
But since equally it must be pronounced to be the position of all predicates, it appears as the most formal contradiction. So lots of determinations, all contradicting, right? Insofar as both the negating and the positing belong to external reflection, this is a formal and unsystematic dialectic which has no difficulty in picking up here and there a variety of determinations, and on the one hand demonstrates with equal ease their finitude and mere relativity, as on the other hand, since it thinks vaguely of the absolute as the totality of determinations, declares these to be immanent in it. At the same time, it is unable to raise either the positions or the negations to a genuine unity. But we have to exhibit what the absolute is. But this exhibiting can be neither a determining nor an external reflection from which determinations of the absolute would result. On the contrary, it is the exposition, and in fact the self-exposition of the absolute, and only a display of what it is. So how to translate that? Basically what Hegel is saying is that at this point, the absolute is the sum total of the determinations of all that has come before. But at this point in the position that they're in, if one were to look at just the immediate unity of being and essence as existence, it's just sort of a laundry list that can't manifest itself as the unity in its finished form. It's just sort of formal, unsystematic, is what he says. The quantity has not turned over into quality for what the absolute relation will eventually turn out to be. Does that make sense? Like it's a quantity of determinations at this point, which include essence and existence, but it doesn't have that infinite factor yet that turns it over into a quality apart from it. It's interesting to claim that too, because up until now, the connective dialectic, all the way up until this point, has shown itself to be transformative at every stage, right? But because there's no becoming, and he says this on the first or second page, there's no becoming in this form, right? And so the new unity can't actually take action yet. You know what I mean? It can only take action through its moments of possibility, necessity, and the unity of the two. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. But before those determinations are determined, it's just a mishmash of
Right.
Of existence and essence.
The absolute actuality is going to mirror measure in a sense here, dealing with two different qualities as they merge fully.
Right. Right now, the determinations which have collapsed in on themselves of being and essence as existence, right, are indifferent to each other, is what I think I'm reading.
Yeah,
So it
that's
cannot
like
translate into the next quality.
just like quality and quantity were indifferent to each other until they weren't.
Right. And the question comes about in this form. Why exactly do we care about this particular point? Because and I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. It's a point in the triad. It's point number one in the sub triad of actuality.
actuality has a triad, 1, 2, and 3, and the third is always the unity of the first two.
Yeah.
Or of the second in its determinations. I
The
should say.
absolute actuality as such becomes the absolute relation, yeah.
Right, and so what this would show up as in reality, he says in the Science of Logic that if you look at Spinoza or Leibniz's systems, you know, this is what they, uh, um, you know, that's the analog in real life. You have this set of attributes and modes, but they don't add up to a full subject object, so on and so forth, right? It's only well, like you said, it's only, you know, the unity of uh, you know, the outer and the inner together, something along those lines. um Trying to think of what else to compare it to, but it's not the easiest nut to crack, to be honest with you. And the fact that it's allotted such a truncated position in the encyclopedia leads me to believe that he didn't really think it merited all that much discussion. The expression of the actual is the actual itself, so that the actual remains still something essential in this expression and is only something essential so far as it is immediate in immediate external existence. Yeah. Now I'm basically just repeating, trying to make sense of it while I read.
Yeah.
How's it going, Doug?
Okay.
Busy with Nietzsche?
Yeah.
I'm waiting for my state to do another plate of one of our big celebrities around here, Bigfoots. Waiting for
Bigfoot is everywhere.
Bigfoot Oklahoma plate.
Is there really a plate? Oh my gosh.
There's enough of a following thing around here. I'm not surprised. They may actually be considering it for something like a specialty plate.
Our shadow vice president.
Right. Oh God, now that reminds me of the podcast where he literally was the shadow vice president, I think.
Really?
Man, it's been true since 2020. They won the election.
It was, I can't remember the name of the podcast at the moment, but it was people who were fans of the Knowledge Fight podcast that did a play and actually tried to bring some more leftist thought into that kind of conspiratorial right-wing aliens are real plays and managed to insert a few things because it made sense. Begins with a C, I can't remember, but they had Bigfoot as a big character for all that.
All right.
Yeah. All right. I know that's a tangent, but
Bigfoot is never a tangent. He's in all things.
that Bigfoot is the singularity in the future, right?
I mean, if Hegel said that Napoleon was the world spirit on horseback, then who are we to deny that Bigfoot is the world spirit in the White House?
Uh,
And we already talked about all that.
Hmm?
No, we already talked about what's coming up here next chapter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't go all the way through it, but next chapter is actuality, and
Mhm.
actuality gets into
Yeah, you meant
contingency.
possibility, contingency, and all that already. So yeah,
Yeah. What?
necessity. Wait,
No. Where?
is that's formal, relative, and yeah, okay.
No.
So formal is immediate, relative is mediated, and absolute is yeah, okay. Because that's again what happens. Absolute absolute necessity. Formal, determinative, relative, and
I know I've read this before, but
yeah.
it has. It's been a while. Relative necessity or real actuality, possibility, and necessity. Okay. Absolute necessity. Okay. And then you get into the absolute relation. Basically, um, what adds up to what Hegel calls substance includes this last triad of actuality. Hmm. Sorry. This is one of the more difficult sections of the logic.
Yeah. All right. I just started reading a horror series called the SCP Foundation, and now I'm seeing all the clear people who are philosophers that read this. They talked about measuring realities in sense of Hume's, and then munes are measured by Kant counters, and there's the Hegel, I forget something in here.
Yeah.
They even Slovak even shows up on this Zizek, and somebody references him.
Yeah.
It's I don't like the description though because it makes no sense, as we know, because it's
Yeah.
yeah. Slavoj Žižek, a notable Hegelian Marxist philosopher.
So every word of that is wrong. He's not a philosopher, he's not a Marxist, and he's not a Hegelian.
He's Hegelian in appearance, but then you read into it, it's not.
Oh, no.
He-
I mean, by that logic, you could say Heidegger is Hegelian in appearance. He talks
or
about Das.
Haas, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, they say it is what I'm trying to say, but it completely, yeah, diverts away from the actual path at that point.
Yeah. The determinations are nothing alike.
Right.
Although the labels are
Yeah,
abused.
purely labels is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
A Hegel localized meme distortion device. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
No, 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 you're fine.
It makes no. I don't know what they're trying to get at with that.
Yeah. So, um, one thing I notice, like
Here,
going forward a little bit, is that the relationship of causality and then the reciprocal action. What we're talking about here are the moments that make them up, right?
mhm.
So, he talks about conditions, matter, and activity, which activity is conditions plus the matter itself, right? And then you go back from that, and you're talking about possibility, necessity in there, and then back from that is what we're talking about today, which I mean really is defining what the unity of existence and essence amounts to, which like are attributes of things or modes of existence. I'm thinking they're like the building blocks of the later of the later arguments is what I'm trying to say. And it's hard to define them in themselves, especially with as little paper as he devotes to it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, on page 531, about halfway down, he says, essence, existence, the world in itself, whole, parts, force. These reflected determinations appear to ordinary thinking as a true being which is valid in and for itself, but the absolute is against them as the ground in which they have been engulfed. Now,
Is
because, yeah,
go ahead. I was just saying, it's interesting. Again, it's another example of hey, here's the point you can stop at and see where people, fail to continue.
well, all of those determinations thought about externally
Mm-hmm.
is I think what he's trying to get at. So if you go to Berkeley's philosophy, you go to Locke's philosophy, he talks about all this stuff, but none of it's really connected up properly dialectically, right? And so that's just kind of the end point, is the sum total of reflection and being, but not really systematically connected, is what I think he's trying to say. In his exposition, it all is, right? It's all dialectically connected because it's all derived from sheer being. But if you open up Berkeley or Hume or Locke, you'll find these things sort of arbitrarily discussed in an external manner. I think that's his point. And then the whole doesn't really reflect the parts, or the parts the whole. Or does it? Because he says at this point it's the unity of the inner and the outer, right? Yeah. This is the point where a teacher like Alex would be helpful. He could probably tell us a little better. Harris wasn't very helpful on this point either. Harris pretty much jumped to actuality, just like Hegel in the encyclopedia. And so, I don't know, it seems a bit of a contradiction. Well, like we said, the doctrine of the essence is supposed to be the hardest to really parse. Hang on just a second, I'll be right back.
Yeah. By the way, I guess they're doing the podcast right now too. I see Chris and Aaron already going.
Yeah, I saw a message about that. I wanted to test out if like the Zoom worked since I re-uploaded everything on the laptop, but I didn't want to do a podcast, and I figured I could just listen in on most of this.
Yeah, that's fine. I was going to ask because I do know what a lot of the laptops have built-in hardware diagnostics you can boot into usually.
I mean, it's fine now.
Okay.
I mean, the diagnostics, I had tried them, but they hadn't fixed it and everything.
Oh.
So I figured it was worth, getting those parts, doing the DIY and, reinstalling Windows.
Okay. So you
And
did
it works like new now. It's
you
pretty good.
replaced hardware to
Yeah, I replaced the SSD
so the
and the RAM.
in the memory. Okay.
Yeah, so it has like double the memory it has, and it has like I think a higher processing speed is what it has.
Just an
Okay, whatever. Either way,
CPU, yeah.
the problems I had before, I don't have now.
Yeah, so
that's what matters to me.
That's what I was saying. That might have, like they're saying, might have been a failing hard drive, plus you upgraded to have more capacity to hold stuff. So that's
useful.
I
mean, the most I
extend
download this for is either lots of PDFs or music.
I think, yep, that's going to extend the life of that laptop more. That's what it sounds like. That's
Yeah,
good.
that's fine. You know, it's like if I had like a few $100 more, I would have just bought an extra laptop. But I think
Yeah.
this is fine.
All right. All right,
I
Matt.
did get caught up with reading while I was, you know, like last week. Unfortunately, I didn't do Hegel,
That's
mostly just Trotsky.
all right. Yeah, because a new laptop purchase can be pretty. I know that personally, so
Yeah. I mean, this one was actually a gift from somebody, and it does everything I want it to. I just don't want to replace it if I can avoid it.
right. Hey, no, he's still doing whatever. Okay. All I was gonna say, I guess one thing I can think about is the only time I actually got to watch a lot of the Chris and Aaron live was the time some Trump dude thought they were being super sarcastic, like they were playing a joke, pretending to be socialists this whole time. And then the moment he realized they were serious, it's like, what
I'm back.
the hell is wrong with you?
I must have not been on that stream.
Nah,
That's okay.
it was a it was a terrible trolling attempt once he realized it. Welcome back, man.
I didn't really leave. I just had to. Gretchen said that the internet was off on her thing, so um, I reset it. Honestly, I think she was on the 5G. Does it still work? Does it work?
Yes, why are you telling your friends?
Because I did. It's 8:45. It's time for bed. So why don't you start getting ready for bed? Hang on just a second. Sorry.
All right.
Okay, I'm back. Uh, so yeah, I wouldn't say this chapter is a big nothing, but uh, I
Not
don't know.
as big as it's.
After reading Harrison's uh, dissertation, in which he basically shows that any discussion in this book of Spinoza is basically just the caricature Jacobi made for his pro-religious, uh, anti-rationalist stances. Uh, you know, it sort of puts me off. On the one hand, the descriptions I think are legitimate of um, what's going on with the triads and the immanent logic. Um, it's just that when he connects them with um, the Jacobian stuff, you gotta almost wonder. Hang on just a second.
No, Brian. I read what you linked. Some of what you linked, Jim. I didn't get a chance to read it in full, but oh my god, Jacoby. I know you're Spinozist without really much evidence the whole time is just that's funny.
Yeah, Jacoby's been obsessed with Spinoza.
Yeah, it's like the anti-communist of today.
Yeah.
Your milk, sweetie.
I don't know.
Milk, milk, Rosita.
I don't know how.
The meeting. How big is Harrison's?
Oh, it's less than 200 pages. It's
Yeah,
actually a pretty easy read. The
there.
the most difficult part of the book. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, no. I was just saying I found it just now in
Oh,
my
good. Yeah.
my copy of Zotero. I backed both his and Friends up.
I wouldn't say any part of it's very difficult or
Just
difficult at all. But the hardest part for me, I think, was the final chapter because one, it was the longest, uh, and second, if I recall, you kind of have to keep pace with all of the. Hang on.
oh my, yeah, this is gonna be a fun read, and I know how annoying Jacoby actually was.
No popsicle, honey. You've already had it. Let's no Oreo. Let's go brush your teeth. Go to bed. Come on.
Tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
All day tomorrow?
That's
I
right.
had like the intellectual loyalty of the day. Swear that you're not and never have been a Spinozas.
You know, it'd be kind of funny to hear someone claim that today, as of today, unironically.
Well, thing is, there's a very definite connection between Spinozism and Marxism. So,
Yeah, it's just turned into that, right? That's
I mean, Marx and Engels were unabashed admirers of Spinoza. Then in Russia, Russian Marxists really got into Spinoza, and the Soviet Marxists continued with that too.
Uh, yeah, I'm back. The portion of Hegel's logic that talks about the conatus or the uh, what is otherwise called the life, the self reproducing, the reproduction of self, I guess you could call it, right? The um, the drive to keep living, I guess you could say, to be what you are because of what you are, etc. That is the conatus, and Spinoza defines that in his system. Okay, so he's definitely involved in defining the concept or the absolute idea as what a you know parallel to what Hegel developed in his system. So for Hegel to say that Spinoza doesn't get out of the doctrine of essence in terms of his system is completely erroneous. Um, uh, but you live in 18th century Prussia and you have to make concessions, at least on paper, uh, which I think was the case. Um, uh, Harrison's point, though, in his paper, uh, uh, while he does concede this, he also says that you have to take it seriously because it has effects in German idealism, past uh, both in Hegel's day and after Hegel's day. And um, what it means is that um, if there's a discussion of Hegel's philosophy, an actual reference to the ethics or to the theological, political book or any of his other writings isn't direct. You know, you notice in all the literature from that era, going all the way up to today, for a good part, it's all second, third hand sources. Jacobi says this is what substance is for, for Spinoza, and everybody copies that, to get along, as opposed to actually reading the book. And so the book is neglected, and it stayed that way for a long time. And Harrison in his book talks about the way the French theory deals with both Hegel and Spinoza, completely erroneously setting them against each other. So if you read French theory, you read any of these Verso books that have been coming out for the last couple decades that talk about Spinoza or Hegel, yeah, they're part of that tradition of.
Well, I think it goes back to Althusser.
Yeah.
And there's a fiction
Right.
series, this gangs, the Spinozas versus Hegelians fighting each other, right?
Well, there's a French book by Macquarie called Spinoza or Hegel, and that systematizes that sort of and or, and if you were in French theory throughout the mid 20th century, you picked either one side or you picked the other. So Althusser picked the Spinoza side. An awful lot of Spinoza's description, according to Althusser, unfortunately, doesn't actually conform to the ethics. It conforms to what Jacobi said about Spinoza, or Schelling did, or any of these fakers. So that's a big problem with German idealism. It had such a big impact, unfortunately, thanks to Hegel's influence as well. That picture of what the ethics is doing, the caricature, I should say, was taken as what Spinoza is actually doing. So anyway, yeah, take the time and sit down and read it, because it's well worth breaking out the history, so that you're not just saying, well, this is just the fake stuff, and just gloss over it, because historically it's actually important to get under your belt. Harrison told me directly that it's well worth it to sit down and read Jacobi's letters on Spinoza, from his real or imaginary conversation with Lessing on his deathbed. And the main reason is that if you read them, you'll get a good feel for the caricature. And so when you see it in any of the modern philosophical writers, you can immediately rule it out as erroneous, not having to do with Spinoza at all. And then you can write cool critiques basically saying, yeah, he just borrowed that from, so and so borrowed it from Jacobi, who made it up so that he could rescue God for philosophy, right? And claim that the rational can't actually determine what God is. What was the point? Sort of this repurposing of a pro-religious argument for a modern philosophical discussion of, I don't know, secular themes, I want to say. Does that sound about right? I don't know. I haven't read French theory. I haven't spent any time with Althusser or Deleuze, and those that have.
Most of these people are not worth your time. I mean, Althusser, sort of, because he does deal with some debates within Marxism, but people like Deleuze, Guattari, all those assholes, they really have nothing to offer. It's just repackaged Nietzscheanism and irrationalism, and it's really not worth the time at all.
Yeah.
I mean, French theory, the only French theorists we should be translating are people like Pierre Brouet, Maurice Domaget, Albert Sabot, Marxists, not this postmodern rubbish It's contributed nothing. It's not worth it. It's better if you were to spend the rest of your life reading Hegel's logic. That's a far better use of your time than reading the whole corpus of postmodernism and French theory.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
rubbish.
I would
It's
agree.
based in Nietzsche, Heidegger, all this crap, and it's not worth it at all.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. And the fact that they all try to use the fact that they try to put all of that you just rattled off, Doug, in Spinoza's mouth, or even Hegel's in some cases, is even more insidious, damaging, I would say. Which is why at the end it's not really the best advice to say, well, just critique these guys and then like you can completely bypass them and just read the, from the horse's mouth. Read Spinoza directly, read Hegel directly, know the history behind their systems,
The American
and you got it.
Academy is very peculiar because most of the philosophy departments are analytical oriented. Then you have the continental thought, which is mostly not in the philosophy department. It's mostly in like the French language department, English departments, and so forth. But most of what passes for continental thought in the U.S. is French theory, and
Deleuze,
as
Guattari.
Doug says, a repackaging of Nietzsche and Heidegger.
Yeah.
Like obviously, classical philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, Descartes or whomever are absolutely worth your time and everything. But I think like philosophy is not like whatever the postmodernists are. It's just worthless rubbish. And most of it's incomprehensible. And if you actually can understand what they say, it's so banal or so stupid that you wonder, why did I waste this much time doing it? That was my experience reading Ernesto Lacau. I'm like, I don't care what this is. And it's like, and that's like, I mean, he can write clear when he justifies anti-Semitism. Nice job, asshole. But yeah, most of these people are just not worth your time.
I got someone who wants me to read Bruno Latour.
Yeah, don't do that.
Non-modernism.
Yeah, just what was I gonna say? Prometheus and Gaia, I think, if I remember correctly, Bruno Latour is taken down there, and that's what you got to read.
Jeez, didn't even think about that. All right.
Yeah, Bruno Latour.
I thought I recognized his name before. Now I know why.
Which one is he? Is he the Promethean or is he the?
I can't even remember at this point. It's been a while. I mean, I have to deal with some of these like postmodern assholes in what I'm writing now, just because like they're all based in fascist philosophy. So it's like they're really not worth it. I mean, if you really want to read them, of course, go ahead. But I don't think any of it is salvageable. I think it all should be rejected.
Yeah, Bruno Latour is a self-described Gaian.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, here it is. Pick it up. It's cheap now because it's in paperback. There's absolutely no excuse. This is a great book, but for me, it's taking multiple readings to get the full, because like my first read was almost exclusively on, just sort of getting the terrain down of what a Promethean and a Gaian are, and what the real alternative is. But there's far more written here on a philosophical basis than than just that surface argument. Anti-humanism in philosophy, I think, is a real dead end.
Yeah. I mean, Foucault is like this neoliberal jerk who's anti-communist and for some reason loves the Islamic Republic of Iran, which, all right.
And Foucault went through
Do
all
what you're gonna do,
different
douchebag.
political stages. As a young guy, he was a communist, and
Well, more specifically, he
I
was a
got
member of the French
either pushed
Communist
out
Party.
or quit the party. And he declared himself to be a Nietzschean and an anti-communist. And through the early 60s, he was regarded as being a Gaullist. He actually served on a commission under President de Gaulle on reforming French higher education. And he did some foreign teaching stints. And he's place that had the most influence was he taught in Tunisia, where he said most of his best students were communists, and that's sort of pushed him back to the left for a while. Then comes back to France, but
Well, he was involved with Sartre and one of the
yeah,
Maoist groups in
yeah,
prison abolition, I
68,
believe.
post
Okay, so he
68,
did
post
something okay
68.
with his life, but I tried reading, it was either Discipline and Punish or
Yeah,
one of those works, and it felt to me like I was reading some kind of S&M book. And I'm like, no offense if that's your kink, honestly, but it's like I just couldn't go into it.
yeah. I think he did have a personal thing for that too. So
I didn't know. I'm not surprised, but I wasn't going to make fun of him for that.
one of his biographers talked about his personal life. He frequented the San Francisco bathhouses and did so long after when it was no longer a very safe thing to do. He kept doing it, which is basically how he got picked up AIDS.
What one of the um, I know it sounds trite, but one of the advantages of being historical materialists is that when we read philosophy, we're able to incorporate the history of the philosopher as well as um, the philosophy that was behind it and in front of it uh, together, and you get the whole package. You know, so one could read Hegel's Science of Logic and just sort of take it at face value, right? I mean, swallow everything as if this is all connected and this is all legitimate. But if you look at the history, you begin to break out where, um, um, where Hegel has sort of constructed a firewall between his immanent philosophy and his commentary on it, which you know is mostly either political or um, I don't know, sort of commenting on the previous period in philosophy. Um, and I'm not sure how much that practice is actually followed through with. Anyway, uh, cool. Well, it's 9:07. Um, uh, so we've gone past time. Um, and so let's see what we're reading for next time, real quick. We can keep talking as we like, but let me just assign chapter 2. Yeah, just chapter 2, which includes um, yeah, actuality, contingency or formal actuality, possibility and necessity, so on and so forth. So from page 541 to 553. Uh,
So I guess the Olympics are over.
Oh, really?
Yep.
I'm pretty sure I saw a few articles talking about how Paris had sort of worsened the local homeless situation by driving people out.
It happens
not what-
almost every Olympics. They do
Mhm.
that.
Yeah,
And then also the people who got sick while swimming in one of the rivers. That's part of the thing.
yes,
Yeah, Seine River's pretty dirty.
yeah,
It was in Paris back in the 80s. I took a boat ride on the Seine. You can see it was a really very filthy river. They supposedly cleaned it up a bit since the 80s, but still
obviously
dirty,
not.
still a dirty river.
Oh,
Yeah,
there it is.
yeah,
There's already a
I wouldn't jump into that river.
Wikipedia article called Concerns and Controversies of 2024 Summer Olympics, including the culture war crap from the opening.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure people got out of that river injured in one way or the other.
Oh, the hijab ban. Lovely. Of course they did.
Oh yeah,
Forcible eviction of migrant camps. There it is. Exploitation of workers is 100% common with these things.
It happens at every Olympics when they do the LA Olympics. It's going to be the same thing again anyway. They'll do it.
In World
Yeah.
Cup had the same problem too.
yeah. It highlights the urban situation every single time.
I think
Uh,
the funniest thing I saw was don't remember who Israel was playing. It was just it was a soccer match. He's saying, yeah, so Israel was doing great for the start, but they basically got trounced by the other side. And this guy with the Israeli scarf coming around says, no politics, no politics. I'm like, I'm just talking about football. No politics.
oh yeah, the guy with the Israeli scarf. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
It's funny
finally,
because he was actually complimenting the Israeli team.
yeah.
The guy automatically thought that he was saying something nasty, and when he realized that the guy wasn't hearing anything whatsoever, uh, he started saying, free Palestine.
Yeah.
You know, was hilarious. I mean, whether the guy talking believed it or not. I mean, he realized that all there's left to do is gaslight this guy into acting like an even bigger asshole. Which
Right.
good job. It's not that hard with these people. They're made of tissue paper. It doesn't take much to turn them into a flaming bag of poop.
Self-igniting bag of poop. Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't take much. Hmm. Are you guys already watching Chris and Aaron and them?
I close it out a bit because we were still talking here.
Yeah.
But
All I say is I'm glad that I'm sure Doug agrees with me. We're glad when the Olympics did not come to Boston
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I was very glad when they actually
because
there were
people
protests against it.
yep, because people like
And
John Henry, who owns both the Red Sox and the Boston Globe, was pushing for it, and Robert Kraft was pushing for it, and Marty Walsh, was mayor, was pushing for it. All the usual assholes, but
Yeah.
all I can say, what a disaster it would have been. But
Yeah. Boston would be in a total shambles if the Olympics came.
yeah,
I mean, if I was still working in the city, it would have been horrible to like try and commute in there. I'm not sure if I could have. 'Cause
probably
you
not.
literally,
Because
yeah,
They probably would have asked you to sleep in the office for a month.
yeah. I remember like we've had a few. I, it was a 2004. I think there was like the DNC here. I made sure to like
Yep.
avoid going into Boston.
I remember
Yeah,
that. That
period.
was not a good situation then either.
It's Unbelievable.
I mean, back then, 2004, I was unemployed, so it didn't matter so much. But Boston, one of the claims the proponents was making was it would push the political establishment to fix public transportation in Boston. And if you believe that, I can tell you I have a nice bridge in Brooklyn to sell it.
I mean, hasn't it been in the last 4 years they finally started to get a few new subway trains?
Yeah.
So it's not just all from like the 70s.
Yeah, it's only very recently they made any effort really to fix it. And they still have a long, long way to go on that because it's been none of the governors of the past 40 years have done much for. None of them ever gave a damn about the MBTA. So the last governor who had any interest in it at all was Michael Dukakis, and that's 40 years ago.
Yeah, Michael Harrington loved him.
This magic bridge is called.
So, Doug, I just wanted to bring this up face to face because the few times that I've been wondering when we're going to get back to volume 3, everybody's sort of like, well, I just want to read shorter things. And so I'm wondering if we're even going to be able to
Well, we
finish
should
that
talk
through.
about it. I mean, we're 200 and something pages in. I'd
Yeah.
imagine it would take another year at least to finish. And
Yeah.
if people want to read shorter things, then, you know, there was the Thursday night group. They can do it another night. I've got so much going on that it's like I'm only guaranteed myself the Wednesday night group.
Wednesday night. Yeah.
So I don't know. I probably am not going to be a part of any shorter reading. But if people want to do that, go ahead. But I would like to finish this.
Same.
And, you know, it's like, I know Chris was away for a while. Ben has had stuff and everything. But, you know, if we decide not to do it, okay. But let's make a decision one way or the other.
Agreed.
Because, you know what? I know that there was some new woman, I forget her name. She came on last week, and that's okay, but it's like if they want to do a new thing for her and other people, good. But it's like if she wants to be in the capital group, I'm not going to start over for her or someone else. They're going to have to jump in unless
Right.
they want to do another group starting over. That's their thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Okay. Well, one way or the other, I'm still committed to finishing volume 3 as well. So, yeah. Cool.
Cool.
All right, guys. Uh, I'm gonna let you all go, and like I said, we'll read for chapter 2 in here on actuality, and go from there. Sound good?
Yep.
All right.